Operation Hope of Fairfield, the Housing Authority in Fairfield, and Fairfield Housing Corp., our nonprofit 501c3, declare a housing crisis for our most vulnerable residents in Fairfield in the aftermath of the pandemic.
Without stable homes, children and youth face challenges in school, families struggle to maintain employment, and those fighting physical health, mental health, and substance use issues lack the support to adequately address their problems.
Well, today, Carol Martin of the Fairfield and Westport Housing Authority and myself, representing Operation Hope and our peers across Fairfield County, are talking about the omission of funding for affordable housing development and the homeless service sector in the new American Recovery Act funding that's coming from the federal government to the state.
Why is this important?
It's important because the strides that we made under the CARES Act funding and under the direction of Governor Lamont helped us serve thousands of homeless people, getting them off the streets and into secure housing. But there's always a need. So the effects of the pandemic have sort of exacerbated the sort of effects of the downturn in the economy and the sort of health crisis that the pandemic brought, making our housing costs rise, making it more out of reach for people of limited means or with challenges. So without the funding being restored, we lose things like the front end of our system, the 211 front door for people to get services. We lose emergency shelter coverage, especially during cold weather or other health crises. We lose the case management that goes along with housing to make sure that people who have a lot of significant barriers are able to stabilize once they get housed. And we lose the money that supports our entire system. So we're not asking for a lot. We're asking for the governor and the legislator reconsider and give us 1% of the Recovery Act funds. And with that, we will serve thousands of people across the state and create a better lifestyle for so many.
Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to our dear colleagues from our media outlets and friends and residents and our guest attendees. I'm Amanda Sayegh from the Westport Housing Authority, and I would like to introduce Carla Miklos, Executive Director of Operation Hope here in Fairfield, and Carol Martin with the Fairfield Housing Authority and Fairfield Housing Corporation, who will make an announcement. Thank you.
Welcome. We have an important announcement. Operation Hope of Fairfield, the Housing Authority in Fairfield, and Fairfield Housing Corp., our nonprofit 501c3, declare a housing crisis for our most vulnerable residents in Fairfield in the aftermath of the pandemic. We are calling for immediate action from our state-elected representatives, Governor Lamont and his staff. Today is a call to action for the General Assembly to revisit the Governor's Action Plan, which controls the distribution of discretionary $2.8 billion of federal American Rescue Funds. The town's residents and the state's residents need and deserve a housing and housing services line item in the governor's allocation plan. Currently, the allocation plan has zero funds available for this purpose. However, we know that our dedicated and gifted representatives here in Fairfield and many others across the state are willing and able to address this unintentional oversight and remedy for the good for our most vulnerable residents. The revision to the governor's allocation plan needs to include simultaneous and substantive investments in both short and long-term permanent, sustainable, affordable housing for our most vulnerable residents, with comparable investments into homeless and our other supportive services. The system in place for housing with services is and has been a successful model, but it will fail if it is not given access to these federal funds. We cannot and should not let this incredible opportunity pass on this unprecedented infusion of federal funds coming to our state.
Good afternoon. Carol made great points about how this funding could be used to help solve the housing crisis in Connecticut for our most vulnerable residents. There's no question that funding the longer-term solutions that provide appropriate and good quality affordable housing for our struggling neighbors must be preserved. But I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about critical interventions that address short-term solutions to this crisis, a crisis made even more challenging because of the pandemic. The CARES Act funding that we received helped us respond last year to the governor's request that we keep people from spreading or catching the COVID virus. So we addressed the need to get homeless people off the street, and were able to do so because of that CARES Act funding. In Fairfield County, that helped us divert 1,082 people from homelessness, shelter 591 individuals and families, and house an additional 627 households. We demonstrated that this type of investment works. By not being included in the ARPA funding the federal government is sending to Connecticut, our system is looking at losses that will hurt the very people that this funding is supposed to serve. It is crucial that we continue to provide outreach and shelter in emergency and cold weather situations, case management for homeless and at-risk people to stay successfully housed, short-term housing options to reduce the time that someone experiences homelessness, and maintain our 211 system so people in need can get the help that they need to solve their crisis. This oversight can be corrected, and Connecticut can continue to ensure that our most vulnerable citizens don't fall through the cracks. I know there are many demands that our state faces, but we are asking for consideration of just 1% of this new funding to help support these efforts across the state. An investment that is less costly and more effective than allowing people to experience the trauma and indignity of homelessness. We can and we should do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol and Carla. At this time, I'd like to introduce Helen McAlinden, President and CEO, Director of Homes with Hope.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for coming out to address this very needed crisis. My name is Helen McAlinden, President and CEO of Homes with Hope, which is based in Westport, and we're dedicated to ending homelessness throughout Fairfield County. I am speaking to you today from the heart on behalf of the people we serve, the most vulnerable in the state of Connecticut, whose words are often left behind. Their lives have been torn apart by this pandemic, and we need not forget them today. Fairfield County has a lack of affordable housing prior to COVID, and COVID has driven the cost of housing in Fairfield County up, and we have a huge shortage of affordable housing. Connecticut is a very wealthy state, and it's hard to believe that so many people live without the basic need of a roof over their heads. During the pandemic, just like the other speakers here today, I have seen firsthand how the lack of affordable housing is a big problem, resulting in people becoming homeless and remaining homeless. We see an array of people in need due to this public health crisis, between those struggling to keep 3 minimum wage jobs and still unable to keep a roof over their heads for them and their families, and those who have lost employment due to the pandemic. It is a desperate situation in which a lot of funding is needed in order for us to get to where we need to be. Without stable homes, children and youth face challenges in school, families struggle to maintain employment, and those fighting physical health, mental health, and substance use issues lack the support to adequately address their problems. We all love Connecticut for all that it offers. Yet we also fear that Connecticut's past glory will be lost if we don't develop housing across the region in ways that meets the challenges of the changing world in which our towns, region and states exist. We are asking the legislative body and Governor Lamont to allocate needed funds from the $2.8 billion of Rescue Act to subsidise and expand the housing and services to our most vulnerable in need. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me today.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to welcome Sarah Fox, Director of Policy, Connecticut Coalition to End Homelessness.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here today speaking on behalf of CCEH, the Connecticut Coalition to End Homelessness. We represent over 100 homeless service providers and leaders across the state, working to ensure that homelessness is rare, brief, and non-recurring throughout Connecticut. And the word crisis really resonates with me. Today, I'm hearing from service providers every single day about their fears and what's happening in their communities and the needs of the people that they're working so hard to serve every day. And these are individuals, they're youth, they're families, they're your neighbors. They're the people you care about, they're the people that I care about. Homelessness is ever present in Connecticut, and though we have made incredible strides, and we have reduced homelessness over the past 9 years in remarkable ways, we still have people experiencing homelessness every day across Connecticut. And for those individuals, especially during the pandemic, it is a public health crisis. We know that people, especially today, their lives are in peril, and housing is one way to ensure that they get the resources that they need to survive in dignity, to stabilize in the community, and to get their lives back on track. Without housing, it's almost impossible to meet your basic needs, to think about employment, and to think about all of the other things that you need to actually make your life whole. So we at CCH recognize the needs that our providers are calling out and the real importance that this funding that's coming through the federal government through the ARPA funds will have, and the fact that our homeless service providers are woven into Connecticut's infrastructure. And dollars invested into our homelessness response system and towards ending homelessness will have dividends going forward. Because once we ensure that these individuals can stabilize in our communities, they help to, rebuild their lives, they contribute to our taxes, they help to stabilize our communities, and it's really, really important for who we want to be in Connecticut and who we are. So I'm asking that the legislature and the governor truly revisit their thinking on this and come to the table with a proposal that will be really meaningful so that we don't have shelters that face closing, so that we can actually meet this crisis in the way that it demands that we meet it. So I really thank you for having me here today, and I'm hoping that we have a positive outcome from this.
Thanks, Sarah. 2 additional points I would like to make today is by taking action now, there are direct and positive outcomes for the state on job opportunities and healthcare systems. First, construction of new affordable homes creates thousands of good jobs at livable wages. Let's not reinvent the wheel, as Connecticut knows how to build back better, and it starts with good paying, sustainable jobs. Second, increasing the supply of affordable housing with supportive services keeps individuals living healthy and safely without revolving through hospital emergency rooms and skilled nursing homes. Let's reduce the burden on our healthcare system by giving our most vulnerable residents of the state healthy, safe, and permanent homes. The economic recovery, growth, and sustainability of our neighborhoods, region, and the state begin with the foundation that equitable access to safe and affordable housing is provided to all residents. The Lamont administration's investment of American Rescue Plan funds in education, healthcare, childcare, transportation is admirable. However, each of those critical components requires housing stability as a foundation to be successful. There are so many reasons to revise the governor's allocation plan, and really no reasons not to, given the severity of this problem. This concludes our press conference, and I thank you for your time and your attendance. God bless and be well. Investments into homeless and our other supportive services. The system in place for housing with services is and has been a successful model, but it will fail if it is not given access to these federal funds. We cannot unprecedented infusion of federal funds coming to our state.
And good quality affordable our struggling neighbors must be preserved. And I'd like to take a few minutes.
The other speakers here today, I have seen firsthand